Love and hatred are twin forces of the same energy, two expressions of the same deep current that runs through the human heart. We are taught to see them as opposites, to believe that love is pure light and hatred is pure darkness. Yet beneath their surface lies a shared origin. Both arise from deep emotional investment, from the soul's movement towards something it perceives as vital to its existence. One seeks union, the other seeks separation, but both prove that something matters profoundly. Where there is hatred, love once stood, and where there is love, the potential for hatred always lingers in shadow. Love begins as an expansion of the self. It stretches the boundaries of who we are to include another person within the circle of our significance. We pour energy into them, attach our hopes, and weave parts of our identity around their presence. Love does not simply admire, it merges, it commits, it identifies. That is its beauty and also its danger. Because the moment we identify with another, we give them access to the most fragile parts of our being. They become the keeper of our emotional safety, the mirror through which we see our worth. And when that mirror cracks through betrayal, rejection, or even misunderstanding, the same force that once opened the heart now reverses its direction. It becomes defense. It becomes hatred. Hatred is not born from indifference. It is not the opposite of love, but its corruption, its inversion. The intensity of hatred reveals the depth of the original attachment. We do not passionately hate what never touched us. We only hate what once had the power to move us. This is why the pain of lost love feels like fire, because the energy that once illuminated our inner world now turns inward and burns. The same emotional electricity that once built bridges now builds walls. Hatred, in this sense, is love trying to protect itself from further injury, trying to reclaim control in the aftermath of emotional chaos. When love is pure, it flows outward without condition. But when it encounters resistance, when it is unreciprocated, misunderstood, or betrayed, the psyche cannot bear the contradiction. The same current that sought connection now seeks separation. It is the soul's attempt to balance the unbearable tension between desire and rejection. The beloved, once seen as the source of joy, becomes the source of suffering. The mind, unable to hold both realities, flips the energy. It changes the emotional charge, but not the intensity. The result is hatred, a paradoxical form of love still bound to the same person only through aversion instead of affection. The transformation from love to hatred often begins in subtle ways. Disappointment, unmet expectations, or the slow realization that the other person cannot fulfill the fantasy projected upon them. What we loved was never entirely them, but the image we created in our imagination, an idealized reflection of our own needs and desires. When that illusion shatters, it feels like betrayal, not because the other person changed, but because the image could no longer be sustained. Hatred then becomes the psyche's rebellion against its own disillusionment. It attacks the object of affection as a way to deny the pain of the internal collapse. Yet even in hatred, the bond remains alive. The energy of emotion still circulates between the two. Indifference would signal detachment, but hatred signals entanglement. It keeps the other person alive in the psychic field, maintaining the connection through conflict instead of tenderness. That is why hatred feels exhausting. It drains the same energy that once nourished love. The two are bound by invisible threads. To hate deeply is to acknowledge that something within still cares, still reacts, still feels. The opposite of love is not hate. It is numbness, the absence of feeling altogether. Love and hatred also reveal the duality of human nature. We long for closeness, yet we fear dependence. We desire union, yet we crave autonomy. Love dissolves boundaries, hatred restores them. When love threatens to erase the sense of self, hatred rises as a form of psychological defense. It rebuilds the wall that love tore down. The soul, unable to sustain endless openness, contracts to protect its identity. In this contraction, love's expansive light becomes shadow, but that shadow is not evil. It is the natural counterbalance to love's vulnerability. It ensures that the self survives the storm of attachment. Within each of us exists a delicate tension between these twin forces. We love what reminds us of wholeness, and we hate what exposes our fragmentation. The beloved often does both. They awaken the best and the worst within us, forcing us to confront what we cannot integrate. In their presence, we discover not only our capacity for tenderness, but also the depth of our unresolved anger, envy, and fear. Love draws these hidden emotions to the surface, demanding transformation. But when we resist that transformation, the energy curdles into hatred. To understand this dynamic is to understand the heart's complexity. Love and hatred are not moral opposites, but psychological movements of the same current. They reveal how deeply we are bound to our inner world, how every emotion carries its own mirror image. The same fire that warms can also destroy, the same river that nourishes can flood. The emotional life of the soul operates on this paradox, that light and shadow coexist within the same flame. When we see hatred through this lens, it becomes less of a moral failure and more of a signal, a sign that love, once open, has turned inward and now seeks protection. To explore it honestly is to uncover the places where tenderness met pain, where connection turned into fear. Love and hatred are twin teachers, showing us the full range of what it means to feel alive, to risk, to attach, to lose, and to rediscover the power that moves through all human hearts. Unexplained hatred is often disguised love seeking acknowledgement. A paradox that exposes the complexity of the human heart. We tend to view hatred as a rejection, as the absence of love, as something cold and final. Yet, in truth, hatred rarely arises in a vacuum. It emerges where love has been denied, dismissed, or left without recognition. The energy that once longed to connect turns inward, distorts itself, and reemerges as bitterness, hostility, or resentment. What appears as hatred on the surface is often the echo of a love that was never properly seen, a tenderness that was once offered and quietly wounded in return. Every human being carries within them the desire to be recognized, to have their presence acknowledged, their feelings understood, their inner world mirrored back with empathy. Love fulfills that need when it is mutual and safe. But when it is ignored, dismissed, or met with indifference, the energy of that love does not simply vanish. The psyche cannot easily extinguish something that powerful. Instead, the emotion transforms. It seeks new expression. It turns its face from light to shadow, and love becomes the very thing it feared to become: hatred. This transformation happens quietly. It begins when affection meets rejection, when our care is met with distance, our openness with dismissal, our tenderness with coldness. Something inside contracts. The heart that once reached outward retreats, but its energy does not die. It inverts. What was once a desire to connect becomes a desire to withdraw, to punish, or to forget. Yet beneath that hardness still lives the same longing, the same need to be seen. Hatred becomes the disguise that love wears when it has been shamed or unacknowledged for too long. We often see this dynamic in relationships that end abruptly or painfully. Two people who once adored each other begin to despise one another with equal passion. The words become sharp, the silence is heavy, the glance is filled with quiet anger. But if you look closer, beneath the hostility lies something fragile, a yearning that still wants to be understood. The hatred exists because the connection still matters. It's easier for the heart to transform love into anger than to face the unbearable emptiness of indifference. To hate means to still care, even if that caring is twisted by pain. When love is denied acknowledgement, it feels like invisibility. The psyche interprets it as rejection of existence itself. To love and not be seen is to experience a kind of emotional annihilation, as though the most sincere parts of oneself have been erased. The person feels invalidated, powerless, and unseen. In that unbearable vulnerability, the soul chooses another path. It converts the pain into strength, the longing into defiance, the tenderness into aggression. Hatred then becomes a shield, a way to reclaim power where one once felt powerless. It says, "If you won't see me through my love, you will see me through my anger." This is why unexplained hatred often feels disproportionate to its cause. The reaction seems too strong for the situation because it is not about the moment itself. It is about a buried wound. It's love's ghost haunting the mind, demanding acknowledgement through the only language it has left. The hostility becomes a form of communication, a cry that says, "You hurt me by not recognizing my care. You made me feel small when all I wanted was to be seen." Hatred, in this sense, is not destruction for its own sake. It is an emotional protest against invisibility. On a deeper level, unexplained hatred often arises when love was present but never permitted to be expressed. Think of unrequited love, forbidden love, or love that must remain secret for reasons of pride, fear, or circumstance. The repression of that emotion does not eliminate it, it only forces it underground. The longer it stays hidden, the more distorted it becomes. What cannot be spoken becomes tension. What cannot be released becomes resentment. Eventually, the person begins to hate the very one they love, not because love has died, but because its existence has become unbearable. This inner contradiction can split the self. One part still feels the tenderness, the other denies it with equal force. The result is confusion, a love-hate dynamic that feels uncontrollable. The more the heart tries to suppress its affection, the more powerful the hatred grows. It's as if the denied love seeks any possible route to express itself, even through hostility. This is why people sometimes obsess over those they claim to despise. The psyche uses hatred as a substitute for closeness. It is the shadow's way of maintaining connection when love is no longer safe. Even within families, this pattern reveals itself. A child who never feels truly seen by a parent may grow into an adult filled with anger toward them. But beneath that anger lies the same longing for recognition, the same wish for love that was never fully acknowledged. The hostility, then, is not rejection, but an unconscious plea. See me, hear me, love me differently. The hatred is not an ending, but a distorted continuation of love's original impulse. It is love wearing the armor of pain. Unexplained hatred also speaks to a deeper spiritual truth. That energy cannot be destroyed, only transformed. Love that is denied does not vanish, it changes form. It hides behind walls, cloaks itself in sarcasm, projects itself as contempt. But beneath every harsh word or cold silence, there remains an unhealed tenderness still asking to be felt. The more we repress it, the more fiercely it fights to surface. That is why hatred can feel so consuming. It carries within it the intensity of love's original fire. To look at hatred honestly is to uncover love's secret grief. It is to realize that every resentment conceals a longing for acknowledgement, every grudge hides a memory of care, every rejection masks a desire to be embraced. The heart does not know how to hate without having once loved. It is incapable of generating such energy in the absence of attachment. Hatred is the language of wounded love, trying to speak through pain when softer voices are no longer heard. The shadow holds the emotions we refuse to admit, the anger we suppress to appear kind, the envy we hide to seem content, the pain we conceal to look strong. It is the unseen reservoir of everything we reject about ourselves, everything we judge as unworthy or unacceptable. The shadow is not evil by nature. It is simply the part of the self that has been banished from consciousness. It carries emotions we once felt but could not express, desires we once had but were taught to repress, instincts we once trusted but later feared. The more we deny these emotions, the more powerful they become, gathering force in the depths of the psyche, waiting for the moment they can no longer be ignored. From childhood, we are taught which emotions are acceptable and which are not. We learn to smile when we are sad, to be polite when we are angry, to hide jealousy, to silence grief. We quickly discover that certain emotions bring punishment or disapproval, while others earn love and validation. So we adapt, we divide ourselves, we create a mask, the version of us that the world will accept, and push everything else into the shadow. But the shadow does not disappear simply because we refuse to see it. It grows in the dark, feeding on neglect, waiting for acknowledgement. Every emotion we suppress remains alive, vibrating beneath the surface, shaping our thoughts, decisions, and relationships in ways we cannot consciously control. The shadow is the emotional archive of our unprocessed experiences. When we say we have moved on from something painful but never truly faced it, that pain does not dissolve, it sinks. It lives within the shadow, influencing our moods, our reactions, even our dreams. We may not consciously remember what hurt us, but our body does, our nervous system does, and our shadow certainly does. The emotions we refuse to feel begin to act through us in indirect ways. They appear as sudden irritation, unexplained sadness, or misplaced resentment. They manifest as overreactions to small triggers, or as the cold detachment we call self-control. The more we try to deny them, the more they shape our fate from behind the curtain. Anger is one of the most common emotions buried in the shadow. Many people are taught that anger is dangerous, immature, or unspiritual, so they repress it, forcing themselves to stay calm even when their boundaries are crossed. Yet anger, when denied, does not vanish. It ferments. It turns into passive aggression, bitterness, or chronic fatigue. It may even disguise itself as depression, the body's way of carrying the weight of unexpressed rage. Similarly, sadness that is never given space to breathe turns into apathy, a quiet resignation that numbs the spirit. The emotions we suppress become emotional ghosts, haunting the corridors of our consciousness, whispering through our reactions. The shadow also holds envy and jealousy, emotions that most people refuse to admit. We tell ourselves we are above such feelings, that we are happy for others' success. Yet envy is simply the recognition of a desire we have not yet allowed ourselves to claim. When we envy someone, it often means they are expressing something we have buried, a talent, a confidence, a freedom we fear to embody. By acknowledging the envy instead of denying it, we reclaim the part of ourselves that still longs to live. But when we reject envy as shameful, we project it onto others, seeing them as arrogant or undeserving. The shadow then controls how we perceive the world, distorting our relationships to protect us from our own inner conflict. The emotions in the shadow are not limited to the negative. Sometimes we repress joy, tenderness, or vulnerability because they too feel unsafe. Many people have learned that to be open is to be hurt, that to feel deeply is to lose control. So they suppress not only pain but also passion. The result is emotional flatness, a sense of being alive but not fully living. The shadow holds both the darkness and the light we have denied. It is the totality of everything we could be but have not yet dared to become. In relationships, the shadow reveals itself through projection. We see in others what we cannot accept in ourselves. The person who irritates us for being selfish may be reflecting our own unmet needs. The person we call manipulative might mirror the control we secretly crave. The emotions we disown do not disappear. They relocate, appearing in the faces of others. The more we reject our shadow, the more it rules us through the people we attract and the conflicts we repeat. This is why the same emotional patterns appear again and again, as if life is forcing us to see what we refuse to feel. Dreams are another realm where the shadow speaks. The figures that chase us, the strangers who terrify or seduce us, the chaotic scenes that make no sense, all are expressions of what the conscious mind represses. The shadow uses the language of symbolism to deliver the emotions we avoid during the day. It does not judge or punish. It simply seeks integration. Each dream offers a fragment of truth, a glimpse into the emotions that still seek acknowledgement. When we ignore them, the dreams become louder, more vivid, more insistent. The psyche will always find a way to make us face what we have buried. To admit what lives in the shadow requires courage, for it means confronting the parts of ourselves we have long disowned. It means allowing anger to be felt without guilt, sadness to be honored without shame, envy to be explored without judgment. It means realizing that every emotion, no matter how uncomfortable, carries intelligence. Each feeling has a message about what we need, what we have lost, or what we have ignored. The shadow is not an enemy, it is the keeper of our authenticity. It holds the emotional truth that the persona hides, waiting for the moment when we are ready to become whole. The battle is never truly with the other, but with ourselves. A truth that hides beneath every conflict, every heartbreak, every wound we blame on someone else. On the surface, it appears that we are fighting another person, a partner who hurt us, a friend who betrayed us, a parent who misunderstood us. Yet beneath these outer struggles lies an inner battlefield, where our wounds, fears, and unhealed emotions clash with the image we try to maintain of who we are. Every external confrontation mirrors an inner struggle that has existed long before the other person appeared. The people we meet, love, and resent simply awaken what already lives within us, forcing us to face the parts of ourselves we would rather avoid. When someone hurts us, we see them as the cause of our pain. But pain does not emerge solely from another's action. It arises from the meaning we attach to it. The words or deeds that pierce us so deeply do so because they touch something tender inside, a memory, a belief, an insecurity that was already waiting to be triggered. The other person becomes a mirror, reflecting back the emotions we have not yet integrated. In that reflection, we see our own vulnerability, our unhealed attachment to validation, our dependence on approval. The outer conflict is simply the stage upon which our inner story repeats itself. The heart wages war not because others are cruel, but because the self resists seeing its own truth. Each accusation we throw outward carries a fragment of projection, something we have not yet claimed within ourselves. When we say, "They made me feel small," perhaps it is our own forgotten sense of inadequacy resurfacing. When we say, "They are selfish," perhaps it is our own unmet need for care seeking acknowledgement. The other becomes the screen upon which the unconscious projects what it cannot yet bear to see. And so the battle continues, not to destroy the other, but to defend the fragile identity we built to protect our wounds. In relationships, this inner war becomes most visible. Love, which begins as harmony, often transforms into conflict, not because the other person changes, but because intimacy exposes our shadow. The closer someone gets, the more clearly they reflect our hidden fears. The fear of abandonment, of rejection, of unworthiness. We blame them for the discomfort they awaken in us, but it is not truly them we are fighting. It is the part of us that feels unlovable, the part that fears being unseen, the part that still carries the pain of old disappointments. The battle intensifies because love demands authenticity, and authenticity threatens the false self we have carefully constructed. Every disagreement, every misunderstanding is a dialogue between two inner worlds. The mind reacts to protect itself, to preserve its sense of control. We defend our position not only because we believe we are right, but because being wrong would mean confronting our own vulnerability. We fight to win, not to understand, because understanding might reveal our own role in the pain. The ego thrives on separation. It defines itself by opposition. To admit that the real battle lies within would dissolve that separation and challenge the illusion of superiority. Yet until that admission happens, we remain prisoners of our projections, endlessly repeating the same conflicts under new names and faces. Even the enemies we despise serve a psychological purpose. They represent what we reject in ourselves, our aggression, our ambition, our capacity for cruelty or dominance. We condemn them to avoid confronting the same potential within. By externalizing our darkness, we maintain the illusion of innocence. But the shadow we refuse to own does not disappear. It finds its way back to us through others. The world becomes a mirror for our internal divisions, reflecting back the war between who we are and who we pretend to be. The outer battle is only the echo of an inner disunity waiting to be reconciled. To see the battle is inward is not to excuse others' actions, but to reclaim power over our responses. We cannot control what others do, but we can uncover why it affects us so deeply. When anger flares, it signals a boundary crossed or a wound touched. When jealousy arises, it points to a desire we have not acknowledged. When resentment lingers, it reveals the expectations we carry from unmet needs. Each emotional reaction is a messenger from the unconscious, offering insight into the parts of the self still waiting for recognition. The other person merely activates the message. The lesson belongs to us. Many people live their entire lives in resistance to themselves, mistaking inner conflict for outer injustice. They change partners, jobs, or cities, believing that the problem lies elsewhere, only to find the same patterns returning. This repetition is not punishment, but invitation. An opportunity to face what has been avoided. Life will continue to present the same archetypal challenges until we understand that the true opponent is not out there, but within. The same insecurity, the same fear of rejection, the same hunger for validation will reappear in new forms until we choose to face them consciously. When we finally begin to observe our reactions instead of defending them, the battle starts to shift. We notice that anger is not always about the present moment, that grief sometimes belongs to a much older loss. That disappointment often reflects our own unspoken expectations. We start to see others not as enemies, but as mirrors. The person who provokes us becomes the teacher we never asked for, the one who exposes the raw edges of our being. In that exposure lies the possibility of transformation, for we can only heal what we are willing to see. The self is not a unified whole, but a collection of voices, some loving, some fearful, some wounded. The outer conflicts we experience often correspond to the inner dissonance between these voices. The compassionate part wants to forgive, but the wounded part demands justice. The rational mind seeks peace, while the emotional body clings to pain. The battle we experience in the world is a projection of these inner divisions. To resolve it, we must bring these opposing forces into dialogue within ourselves, allowing each to speak, to be heard, to be understood. Every moment of conflict is therefore an opportunity for self-awareness. The people who challenge us, frustrate us, or hurt us offer the most direct path to our own evolution. They reveal where the battle truly lies, in our resistance to our own truth, in our struggle to integrate our light and shadow, in our fear of seeing ourselves completely. The battlefield is not the space between two people, but the space within one consciousness, trying to reconcile the fragments of its own heart. Healing begins when we acknowledge both love and resentment as ours. When we stop pretending that only one of the host or the heart to hold the full contradiction, or the out to hold the full contradiction that belongs to experience. Most people try to choose between the two, to be loving without anger or to be angry without love. Yet the truth is that the human heart does not operate in absolutes. It can love and resent the same person at the same time. It can ache with tenderness while burning with disappointment. To deny either emotion is to fragment ourselves, to divide the soul into acceptable and forbidden parts. Healing is not the triumph of love over resentment, but the reconciliation of both within us. We are taught to view resentment as evidence of weakness and love as the sign of moral strength. But love without resentment becomes idealization, a blindness that refuses to see the complexity of the other. Resentment without love becomes bitterness, a refusal to feel the pain beneath the anger. Both emotions serve a purpose. Love allows connection, resentment protects it. Love opens the heart, resentment guards its boundaries. To acknowledge both is to accept that every relationship, no matter how sacred, will carry the friction of unmet expectations, unspoken words, and wounded desires. We do not heal by erasing that friction, but by facing it with honesty. When we love someone, we invest not only affection but identity. We weave them into the story of who we are. Their actions, words, and silences begin to shape our sense of worth. So when love meets disappointment, the wound cuts deeply. not because of what the other did, but because of what it means to us. Resentment arises as the echo of that pain, a protest against feeling unseen or unvalued. It says, I gave you something of myself, and you did not handle it with care. It is the shadow of love, carrying the unspoken grief of a heart that still wants to be understood. Many people try to heal by clinging to love and denying resentment. They tell themselves to forgive quickly, to move on, to focus on gratitude. But suppressed resentment does not disappear. It buries itself deeper, poisoning the connection it was meant to protect. The voice that says, I'm fine, while the heart still aches, becomes the mask that prevents genuine intimacy. Healing cannot occur where truth is denied. To say, I love you, and I also feel hurt, angry, or betrayed is not disloyalty. It is emotional maturity. It means we have stopped dividing ourselves into acceptable and unacceptable feelings. Resentment, when acknowledged, reveals what love truly needs. It shows where boundaries were crossed, where expectations were unmet, where the self gave too much or asked too little. When we deny resentment, we lose the map to our own emotional landscape. But when we listen to it, it becomes a guide towards self-respect. It teaches us to love without self-erasure, to give without losing ourselves. Resentment is not the enemy of love, it is its guardian, reminding us that love must include the self as well as the other. At the same time, or to cling only to resentment is to freeze the heart in defense. When pain becomes our identity, we stop allowing new warmth to reach us. The memory of betrayal becomes a wall against connection. We begin to mistrust kindness, interpreting every gesture through the lens of past wounds. In that state, resentment hardens into cynicism, not because we stopped loving, but because love still lives beneath the surface, afraid to be hurt again. True healing requires that we look beneath the resentment and see the love still breathing underneath, the longing that never truly died. The heart is not logical. It can feel gratitude toward the same person it resents, compassion toward the same one who caused pain. These contradictions are not signs of confusion, they are proof of humanity. The psyche is vast enough to hold opposites. By acknowledging both love and resentment as ours, we stop demanding that our feelings make sense and instead let them reveal their truth. The energy that was once trapped in conflict begins to move freely again, not by choosing sides, but by integrating both. In moments of deep introspection, we may discover that resentment is simply love waiting for recognition. It is love that has felt unseen, love that was taken for granted, love that wanted to matter. When we allow ourselves to feel it fully, the sharpness softens into understanding. The anger that once seemed directed at another becomes a mirror of our own neglected needs. We realize that part of the resentment we hold toward others is the same resentment we hold toward ourselves. For staying silent, for expecting without asking, for giving without boundaries. Healing begins when we stop blaming others for our choices and start reclaiming the parts of ourselves we abandoned in the name of love. It is tempting to believe that emotional peace comes from letting go of resentment altogether, but true peace does not require the absence of difficult feelings. It requires their integration. To acknowledge resentment is not to dwell in it, it is to see it clearly enough that it no longer controls us. When we name it without judgment, we take its power away. When we feel it without acting destructively, we transform it into wisdom. And when we can hold both love and resentment without rejecting either, we touch the wholeness of the human heart, a heart capable of loving without losing itself, of forgiving without forgetting, of understanding without denying its pain. Every relationship we experience, whether it ends in harmony or heartbreak, leaves behind traces of both affection and frustration. Those traces are not signs of failure, they are evidence of depth. To love deeply is to risk resentment, because only love makes us vulnerable enough to feel hurt. The emotions that follow are the natural aftermath of intimacy, the psyche's way of balancing connection with individuality. When we stop fighting those emotions and then instead invite them into awareness, something within us begins to settle. We realize that love and resentment were never enemies, only misunderstood partners in the same dance of human connection, each holding a different truth about what it means to care and to be seen